You've just been watching Iran Massacre Under a Blackout. Let's go over that documentary. We have in studio Ershad Alijani, who was part of that documentary team. We've also got Pardis Shafafi, who joins us from Oslo, who is an anthropologist and researcher at the CNRS offsite, also co-editor of the forthcoming book, The Long Iranian Revolution, as well as Negar Motazavi, Iranian-American journalist and political commentator. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Ershad, I can't even begin to describe what I've just seen in that documentary. I don't know how you can even begin to sift through those images and corroborate what is real, what is not, what testimonies are true, especially when the regime is trying to black out everything.
I'm talking on behalf of, I think, all of the team that we're working on. We are genuinely devastated psychologically. But that's our job. So we had to verify, we had to gather the testimonies of people. We gathered testimonies of, I think, more than 20 people for cross-referencing, for fact-checking the information, the videos, the photos, the other testimonies that we could gather. It's around 20 years I'm a journalist, and I don't remember many times that I have cried, but most of them when they've been in the last 2 weeks.
That's obviously related to the testimonies that you got firsthand. Exactly. One of those was Ali. Can we just ask, is Ali okay?
To be honest, no, he's not okay. The injuries, they will cure, but his psychological state is not good. He is really, really disturbed, and I'm genuinely worried about him on that level. He has some dark thoughts. We could exchange many times, and no, he's not good.
Faridis Shafafi, this is just one person who's just been affected, and there are, according to the human rights activist news agency, maybe possibly up to 25,000 victims. How do families even cope when trying to recover the bodies of their loved ones under this extreme repression?
I mean, I think what we've seen so far indicates this kind of widespread necropolitics of the state, and the reactions of the families is intended to be one of intense fear for the loved ones that they have that might have been involved in the protests already, but certainly for those who have been forcibly disappeared or that they don't have any kind of information about. I think this is a kind of psychological warfare that's quite common with the Islamic Republic. This is out of the playbook from the 1980s. They've been doing this for 4 decades. But I have to echo Ali and just say that, I've been working on state violence and the Islamic Republic for 2 decades, and I haven't seen this level of kind of naked, explicit, and very public aggression. It really feels performative at this point that they want us to also see how the suffering materializes amongst ordinary people. They really want to show that they are capable of doing this and more.
But Negar, we've heard the Khomeini statements saying that the protesters themselves, there's going to be a crackdown, and really they will be reined in. But do we feel that this is the turning point? Do we feel that these protests were large enough to actually tip the scales and that the end is drawing near for the regime?
Well, I think that's how the state felt in those few days, and that's why we see sort of this sheer unleashing of unprecedented violence, this deadly violence that's been like nothing in the history of the Islamic Republic itself. And this is ironic because at the beginning of the protests, in the first phase, it seemed like the government, the state is trying to take a more moderate approach. They didn't bring down that iron fist at the very beginning. They were trying to negotiate investigate and see if they can meet the protesters and sort of dampen that flow. But the protests just kept growing like wildfire across the country, as your report also suggested, and just got bigger and bigger. And I think also that outside element, for example, President Trump saying that the US is locked and loaded if they kill the protesters, or the exiled prince saying that this is your final battle, get to the streets, that also gave a false sense of safety to the people who were really putting their lives on the front line, on the street. I've spoken to eyewitnesses on the ground who assumed that they're going to be safe and secure, and that the regime is not going to bring down that iron fist that eventually did come down. And it ended up not being the final battle. Help did not come from the United States. The US is still locked and loaded, but hasn't really helped the protesters in any way. I don't even know if the US has that kind of tool to help with only military power. And it's just ordinary people on the ground who paid the price really with their lives, as we saw in the report.
Ershad, we hear that phrase locked and loaded, and the protesters, I'm just curious, you must have spoken to them and they must have given you their thoughts about how the United States might be able to help. But then you see a Doshko machine gun being used on these protesters. What kind of psychological effect is that going to have on them? Do they feel that help is on the way at all?
Honestly, with anyone that I could talk to before, during, after the protests, mostly during and after, for that point. As Alice, I want to quote Ali on this part. He says, "Which nation do you know that's staring at the sky and waiting for the bombs to drop to liberate them?" So I think there's this expectations among the Iranians that someone come to help and to save them. And it intensified after Trump tweeted that if you kill them, we are going to hit you, and we are going to hit you hard. Another point is that many Iranians say that we did all we could do. We poured in the streets in millions, and they just unleashed the hell on us. Mm-hmm. So some peaceful protesters, some random people, millions of them, what we can do more than this. So this desperation, this expectation out of desperation, it really, it did exist, but it's developing more and more among the Iranians.
Well, let's talk locally. Pardis, there's this analogy that we often use. If you want to destroy a rock, it's got a very hard surface. If you hit it from the outside, you can chip away at it. But to really destroy it, you have to go right into the center and blow it up from the inside. Do you think that the way that Iranian society is right now, that they understand the only way to actually change things is really to do things locally, and we might see protests evolve, further protests? Maybe this is just the start of things, and any solutions have to be found internally as opposed to outside help?
I think it's a difficult question to answer. I certainly can't answer it on behalf of 90 million people, and I wouldn't try. I think there are definitely certain segments of society who would prefer a localized response. At the same time, I have immense respect, and I hold space for many people in Iran who I think after 4 decades of the kind of repression that we've seen are understandably in a position where they want change at all costs. That doesn't necessarily mean, and I think this is often misframed as a desire for war. I don't think anybody inherently wants to live in a state that's at war, certainly not one that is subject to foreign intervention of the type that Donald Trump is suggesting. But I do think that it speaks to something that an anthropologist in Stockholm often talks about, this kind of the Islamic Republic as a factory of hopelessness, is that one of the ways that they are able to kind of convey their ultimate power is by destroying hope and destroying a sense of a political imagination, which might think that there could be something after the Islamic Republic, and that there could be a solution that might be able to grow without very, very extreme and often kind of foreign intervention. And the Islamic Republic themselves often speak to, you know, if this was to happen, that they would enact a kind of scorched earth policy, you know, that they would not move away or move aside quietly. So there are these narratives in Iran, and I'm reluctant to say that one or the other it takes precedence, but I have to say, just based on my personal networks, I hear quite often people saying, you know, we're just so tired of this, and it doesn't feel like there's a way out of it, and we'll push as much as we can, but ultimately, you know, how can we just, you know, get rid of this regime? We do need eyes on Iran. We do need support. We do need some support. So I hold space for that, regardless of what my kind of personal political preferences are for the future of Iran.
Negar, in terms of what is available as an instrument for Iranians against the regime, I mean, now they're having to contend with a whole new policy. What we've saw in terms of the blackouts, I mean, just from a personal point of view, to see 90 million people go in the dark just like that in the internet blackouts, that's unprecedented. I'm sure even for you trying to get access information to people back in Iran, what kind of hope is there? What kind of avenues are there?
Absolutely. I'm sure every Iranian is part of these family WhatsApp group chats where during the blackout you would see the messages only delivered to the cousins who live outside and nobody from the inside. You would see sort of even that first tick where the message went through, let alone be seen by the other one. And in some families or groups, we felt like we went back 30 years ago before even internet, where you would find a distant person, cousin or neighbor who had access to Starlink, and you would just send numbers. Strangers would send numbers of family members where that person could call and just make sure that they're okay, and then report back with a list of people that they have been able to contact and let their loved ones know that they're doing okay. It was a very surreal time. So internet freedom and internet tools are actually one sort of place of agreement where Iranians inside Iran, the civil society, and also activists on the outside have been pushing for. They have been pushing for these measures, VPNs, proxies, where people can go around the filtering of the internet, which is the one thing the state has done. But now it's gotten to another level. This entire blackout is something that activists are trying to see how they can go around it and combat and essentially keep sort of that connection alive. So this is a very important, I think, tool. It's not hard power. This is soft power that can be done from the outside, hopefully with the help of the international community and powerful states, including the United States. But beyond that, I think, again, going back to locked and loaded, President Trump has assembled an armada in the Persian Gulf, ready to essentially attack Iran, even discussing all the way to regime change, but simultaneously in parallel, basically saying that he just wants a nuclear deal with this government, with this state. And so it sounds like those tweets or truth socials and that pressure that seemed to be linked to the protesters was just a pressure point for geopolitical demands. It's something that has to do with Iran's foreign policy, Iran's presence in the region, and essentially what U.S. concerns, particularly for this administration, have been all along. And I think that also just adds a lot more to sort of this sense of hopelessness and desperation to the population inside, at least part of those protesters who thought momentarily that this kind of help may be something coming from the outside. And then also on the flip side of it, I speak to a lot of Iranians who have been to protests or have been observers that are worried about the U.S. turning Iran into the next Iraq, the next Afghanistan, the next Syria, the next Libya. You know, bad examples of U.S. intervention are plenty across the region, and many Iranians are genuinely worried about that as well.
Pardis, on that note, we've actually been discussing offset in terms of the economy and what that means for the whole people as Iran in terms of changing the status quo, even for the likes of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. Now, we have heard suggestions that if Iran's oil is actually the target. That is the tipping point. And maybe if we look at past instances like that, would you agree with that statement?
I'm not sure. I think, I mean, certainly it's plausible and it makes kind of narrative sense. But I think we should be really vigilant to this kind of narrative fragmentation as a strategy, and kind of how we simplify the way these kind of economic aims and political aims are played out in real life. I think I'm more concerned with the fact that these are the kinds of discussions that we have at a time where, you know, right now in Iran, there are thousands of people still missing, that we still haven't really documented the full extent of what's happening in the country. I think the fact that we have conversations that are focused more on geopolitics, that we are really looking at the kind of performative theatrics of the Islamic Republic on the international stage in Oman, says more about these kind of diversion tactics, and the fact that we aren't really considering families like those of Robina, who was featured in the documentary right now, and understanding that, you know, the Islamic Republic often rides two horses. They have a dual strategy. They show that they're kind of performing diplomacy, they're discussing resources, they're discussing the economy, things like that, you know, within a normative framework. And at the same time, in Iran, we've got, you know, thousands, tens of thousands, if you trust the amnesty figures, tens of thousands of bodies that are still withheld. People are either held by the security forces or disappeared, or their bodies are being returned in pieces to families, charged for bullets and things like that. And so I really want to focus on what's happening in Iran more than the kind of narrative pull and the geopolitics on the front stage.
Ershad Padis makes a very good point there, because there is a lot that you saw on a personal level in terms of those victims, if we can go back to them. What did you see that you couldn't even broadcast?
We had lots of videos, photos, and information that we could not broadcast in any form on a television. Shattered limbs, shattered skulls, I don't know how to put it in words, but exploded bodies, and not one or two. We had videos, we received a video, especially one video. It was a huge hall, and all the bodies were literally shattered to pieces, and we couldn't broadcast in any way these kind of videos. Or brothers, sisters who've been through hundreds of bodies in Kahrizak morgue to find their loved ones killed there, like Robina's mother, and they documented the summary executions in the hospitals, in the streets, that the security forces didn't take people, they didn't arrest people. Actually, they didn't help people who've been injured on the streets. They end them. They shoot them in the head, and they kill them there, in the hospital beds and in the streets. And we just put, I think, one or two quotes from Ali that he witnessed an execution, a summary execution in Karaj, that women, men, young, old people who've been injured in a street in Karaj, and the security forces advancing in lines and verifying the bodies. If they're alive, they just put a bullet in their heads. And many videos from Mashhad, too graphic to broadcast, impossible to publish in any format, in any form. So those are parts of the fact that we couldn't. I know this documentary is hard to watch. It's gore, it's graphic, but there was editorial obligation and a journalistic, public interest to show what had happened. And on the other hand, we didn't include many other clips and videos that they had documented much more savagery, I can say.
I want to just go back to a quote of Ali. He says he was running through the hospital and there was so much blood on the floor that it was making splashes every single time that he stepped. Pardis, when you hear a statement like that, where do your thoughts go?
I mean, it's incredibly harrowing. I think it's shocking, and it should continue to shock us. I think while the Islamic Republic tries to kind of normalize their violence, I think documentaries like Ershad's and the teams really bring us back into I'd say a more kind of normal state of being shocked by this. Actually, we should continue to be shocked by this, and I think it also tells us a lot about the necropolitics of the Iranian state, in the sense that they don't just, they don't shoot to kill. That's not the point of it. One of the more kind of insidious forms of violence that they're waging is necropolitical. That means that you're really using the currency of death and the threat of death, and the withholding of bodies, but also lots of the things that we heard about in that documentary, including Ali and Robina's accounts. But they're exercising a belligerent sort of control even after the so-called punishment of death is served. You're punishing the families. You're not allowing them to grieve. You're not allowing them to bury their loved ones. And I just want to draw attention to the fact that on state TV, I think it must have been a couple of weeks ago, in a satirical segment, while these harrowing incidents are ongoing, the host looks into the camera and makes a kind of joke and says, poses a multiple choice question to the audience and says, what kind of fridge does the Islamic Republic hide its bodies in? Is it a side-by-side refrigerator or an ice cream machine or a supermarket freezer? And it's kind of designed to be a bit of a joke, and that's the punchline. And I really think that joke isn't really speaking to the people who necessarily believe the state narrative of violence. I think definitely more insidiously, they're talking to the families and the loved ones of protesters, and they're kind of telling them, these lives are not mournable. We can erase you, we can eliminate you, and that really sticks with you in terms of that's a strategy of the state. It's not just an outcome of them trying to crack down on protesters. This is a very active strategy that they employ.
Pardis Shafafi, thank you so much for your thoughts. Unfortunately, that is where we will have to end it. Negar Mortazavi as well, thank you for joining us. And of course, we have our very own Ershad Alijani, who was part of that documentary team. Well done on just revealing the truth there from Iran.